Hello all, welcome everybody. I am Krishnamurty Pammi. I welcome you to the webinar on Let's Write Good Agile User Stories. As part of this webinar, I first want to touch about briefly on what is user story. User story is a short and simple description of a feature told from the perspective of the end user. Today, if we just deliver a requirement, somehow our product can't meet the expectations. Our product, the customers today have a lot of choices. Today, we have to understand the usage scenario of the customer, and then only our product can actually make some entry into the market. Gone are the days where we can't understand customer or we dictate a customer. For example, if you take Bajaj in 1980s, they used to dictate the customer, saying this is how a two-wheeler used to be. In 1980s and 1990s, it was the telecom industry used to dominate the users. Today, users have lot of choices. Unless we exactly meet the usage scenario of the end user, it is not possible for our product to have minimal market. That's why it is very, very important to understand the usage scenario of the end user and describe the requirements from his perspective. So user stories exactly fits there. So it has a template where it says, as a user, I want some functionality or goal so that I can achieve a benefit or a reason. This is how a user story is written. So let's take a sample example here. As a traveler, I want to log into the portal so that I can book the tickets. So this is a just typical example. I just wanted to brief you on user story so that any of the audience, if they are relatively new to the user story, they can exactly understand. For example, if we want a phone, okay, the scenario how I use will differ from the scenario how you use. Now with Reliance Jio coming on, I basically say, okay, I want to use internet using mobile. Somebody may use a phone for hotspot. Somebody may use phone for making calls. Somebody may use phone for camera. So the same product called phone has multiple scenarios. Every user uses and sees the product in their own way. So exactly user story says, as a user, I want this product or I want this functionality so that I can achieve this particular benefit. So this is a typical example of how a user story is written. Now let's for a moment think why we need user stories. Why not the traditional requirements? So if you see in a typical scenario, okay, end users describe their requirements to a business analyst, let's say a product owner, okay, and after 2 months down the line, the product owner consolidates those requirements, and then he writes those requirements, he writes down the requirements, and he provides that requirement to the developers. So typically exactly by when the end user provides the requirement, by when it reaches the end user or developer, it takes some time. So during the time, the requirements, the way the end users understand the requirements might change. For example, in this scenario, I have told our end user says, I want a tape. Okay, the product owner, they basically say they want a tape. And developers feel, yeah, I understood that, the product or end users want a tape. Now you see the time scenario also. Now in typical scenario, how it happens is when end user says, I want a tape, probably they have the electrical tape in their mind. They want the tape so that they can actually apply the insulation over the wires. The product owner, even though he's using the word tape, typically he says, he may be thinking a cellophane tape. And typically the developers, even though they are using the word tape, but they may have the Tyler tape. So all the three methods are tapes only, but everybody were thinking or they're visualizing a different product in their mind. So when the requirements are written down and simply passed on, there is no guarantee that users will get what they want. At the best, users will get what they have written down. Today, my dear friends, today I happen to go to a major telecom provider to purchase their plans. The various options are provided to me on paper. When I wanted some clarification, nobody was giving me the clarity. So I had to infer the relative benefits of the plans by looking at the papers in front of me. Believe me, it was a hard task. So as exactly I told in the previous slide, what the end telecom provider wanted to provide to the user versus what the end user is getting is different unless they are conversations. So typically, even though requirements are written down, okay, at the best, you may get a product of what is written down, but the scenario behind that requirement may differ. That's why you see, my dear friends, nowadays the end customers, they are not getting what they want just because the scenario, the usage scenario, what they're actually telling, that is not been absorbed properly by the developers or by the people who are actually building the product. So exactly the user story, bridges this. How? By having proper conversations. It's the conversations that are important. It's just not the what you have written there. It's the conversation that is important. Okay, when the end user or the product owner, they both talk together, then what they're viewing, what they're visualizing will become in sync. Similarly, when product owner and developers, they talk to each other, then the clarity about the functionality will increase. So that's why, my dear friends, Ron Jeffries, he comes up with a concept called card, conversation, and confirmation. Card means typically on a sticky note, he wants the requirement or user story to be written down. How? As a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. So as a user, the person who's actually using the system, I want this functionality so that I can achieve. So typically, who is requesting this particular functionality? What is being requested and why is he requesting? All the three things are embedded, bundled in one capsule. That's called user story. The intent of making us write the user story on a sticky note is the user story should be so crisp. If we are unable to write a user story on a sticky note, okay, most probably 98% times the story can be split further. So we want to focus upon those granular independent user stories, so that those stories are written down in the format. As a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this on a sticky note. Now once that sticky note with a user story is available in front of us, then the conversations will start. So the developers and the product owner, they have a discussion, a dialogue, saying that what is being requested, why is he being requested, who is requesting. So when the conversation of what is being requested is being triggered, that exactly the scenario, the usage scenario of the end user can better be explained using the conversations. And then there is an acceptance criteria written saying that, okay, I as a product owner accept this story provided the product shows or this feature shows these kind of capabilities. This is called conditions of satisfaction or acceptance criteria. Let's take the structure for a moment. Now, the acceptance tests, as you know, for a user story need to be as a role. I want something so that I can achieve this. We definitely want role. We definitely want the something that is functionality, and so that we can achieve the benefit. So typically, we want the user story to have to follow this format, but in some obvious scenarios, okay, you can omit the so that clause. Okay, you can say, for example, as a user, I want to log into the portal so that I can do something. That is all obvious thing. So in some scenarios where you think that the benefit is quite obvious, you can omit so that, but 99% try to make sure as a user I want this functionality so that I can achieve this benefit. That is how a user story template needs to be there. Similarly, the acceptance criteria. The acceptance criteria is given this particular context, when an event get triggered, then the outcome is going to come. So again, I repeat, the acceptance criteria, the suggested format is given a specific context or given a specific scenario, when an event triggers, then I want the outcome to be like this. So believe me, my dear friends, in real-time scenarios, we don't see the acceptance criteria being written in this exact format. Because of this, again, as I shown in the previous slides, the way the end user assumes the word tape versus the way the product owner assumes the tape versus the way the developers thinks of the word tape actually differs. So that's why we want the conditions of satisfaction or the the acceptance criteria to follow the concept called, or the format called, given the specific context, when an event gets triggered, then I want the expected outcome is this. So this is how we want the acceptance criteria to be written. You also please check on your ground how your acceptance criteria is being written. If they follow this kind of template, obviously you can achieve greater clarity about the requirement. Okay, so let's get to the next story. So before I get to the next section called let's write user stories, let me take some questions. There's one question: can we take all requirements in the form of user stories? For example, how do we write user stories for those cases which does not require a user interaction? Okay, Rajarshi, exactly, you're right. So let me reflect about the user. Okay, now certain times the user stories can be of four categories. Okay, category number one is business stories or business stories, where you basically talk about functional stories. Okay, where the tangible benefits the end user actually get it. So in those scenarios, it is easy to describe as a product owner, as a traveler, as a user, as a player. So you can actually come up with the word user there. You can describe the word user properly there. Number one. Number two, there will be certain development where you basically develop only the APIs. When you actually develop application programming interfaces, your upstream is maybe basically a specific application, maybe using your application. Obviously, we develop application so that somebody can consume. So there will be somebody who will be consuming that. So in case of technical stories, you have to identify that specific, either the application or application component or some other API. You have to have who is actually consuming your story, because the amount of effort we are developing, that effort somebody should be consuming, right? So we have to put the word who is consuming my effort. So that person, that particular clarity in thought process will give you clarity about who is using it. So your story can be a functional story or a technical story, or it can be a knowledge enhancement, or certain times it can be a defect. So this is what it is, Rajarshi. Let me take another question from Girish. In case of RFPs, FFP or FRS or SRS, we have these things in place. We map them with the acceptance test plans. Still, there are more gaps as the users start understanding the product. See, Girish, I think if I understand the scenario right, in certain cases, right, people tend to put retrofit the agile way of writing user stories. See, they just in the name of being branded as agile, just the way the old coffee in a new cup, the same SRS will be there, the same things will be there, just that they twist it so that it follows a user story template. So in the answer from my side is, I think we need to really get into the subject. So just because SRS is written and from there user stories are coming down, that's not the way. But a specific context I want to know so that we can take it later. Next, there is another one more question. Let me go to question from Suman. Should we write the epics and theme in a as a yes. Suman, yes, we definitely want epics also to be written here, because every epic, sub epic, they also have some target reason, target functionality. They have a user, maybe the user may be a little broader term, but a specific benefit will be there, specific functionality will be there. So as a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. If you can write for epic, it will be better. And again, I said, so that clause is not compulsory. When the obvious benefits, you can't bundle it properly, or it's obvious, you can't, it's okay. But as a user, I want this for template, we need to follow for epics also. Okay, next question. Let me take this next question. Uh, yeah, Srijit, as per my understanding, user story has to be full-fledged, uh, down, really classify the user stories, functional, technical, etc. Yeah, see, Srijit, I already told you the user stories can be business stories or technical stories and knowledge items, or a functional defects. So it can follow any of those four things. Okay, next, Siva Prakash. Okay, Siva Prakash is saying, like, transform historical data into specified defined format. This takes 2 to 3 sprints. 2 to 3 sprints work. Yes, Siva Prakash. We definitely, before actually we start, there is a sprint 0 where we actually provide good amount of time to groom these user stories itself. And the more granular user stories with clearer acceptance criteria we come out, the clarity will be the quality of the product also increase, because it's a requirement, it's a user stories, it's a user requirement that actually plays major factor in making sure whether the project goes into success side or failure side. So that's, you're right, that yes, it takes time. And also, user story grooming is a continuous process. I mean, even though we try to groom as many stories as possible at the beginning of the project, at the beginning of the release, okay, but you groom stories during sprint planning, during release planning, during product planning, and during mid of the sprint also, as part of the product backlog refinement sessions, we take it up. Okay, next, Srijit. Yes, Srijit is saying the story should be vertically sliced. Yes, Srijit, you're right. The user stories should be business sensible as much as possible. Okay, it should be business sensible as much as possible. So that's why we have to do vertical slicing, because there is a UI, there is a middle layer, there is a database layer. So instead of going in a horizontal way, first I develop database, then I go middle layer, then I develop the front end. Instead of that approach, we wanted to say slice it vertically, so that every slice has a front end component, a middle layer, and a database layer. So this is how you can basically provide the business tangible result to the end user. You're right. Now, Shiv Prakash says team need to work on multiple user stories. Okay, so Shiv Prakash, this I wanted to take it up into a different session. Basically, it's about execution. Now, Ravindra Kumar says, what is the exact difference between use case and user story? Very good question, Ravindra Kumar. If you take use case, Ravindra Kumar, it has an actor who is triggering with the system. The moment that actor touches the system, how the user interaction is tracing through the middle layer, sorry, front end, middle layer, database layer. Again, the response coming back from from the database, middle layer to user case. It's basically your use case talks about who is triggering the system and how the trajectory is going across the system. So in use case, it is basically focusing on how user is getting a response. So in use case, you have a happy path, and a failure path, and alternate path. Whereas that basically they describe how part of the system. User story. In user story, what end user wants is what described in user story. User story is a story of a user, a story of a user on what I am getting. That is what is written. So user story is tagged with the word what. Okay. Whereas use case is tagged with the word how. Okay, how user interaction is triggering the front end, and it's going to middle layer and database layer, and again coming back. So it's about technical details will be written in use case, whereas in user story, technical details we don't describe, it just what is expected for the end user is only written. Okay, is it clear, Ravindra? Okay, Arun Kumar is talking about, please explain Epic. Arun, Epic is a conglomeration of so many user stories. It's an umbrella of so many user stories. Okay, Epic is it's a super circle of a user story where a epic can be divided into sub epics. Sub epics can be divided into a user story. So if you take a tree, okay, the trunk of the tree is an epic, the sub branches are sub epics, and the leaves are your user stories. I hope it is clear to you, Arun. Now, Shiv Prakash is asking another question. We need to divide development related work into multiple user stories. How do we define users in this case? Exactly, Shiv Prakash. Shiv Prakash, it all depends upon who is consuming your effort. Obviously, whatever effort our team is developing, there should be some consumer, right? Who is consuming? Is the consumer is the end user? Certain cases, yes, where the end user is experiencing. Certain cases, certain other application is using your effort, right? Some you are developing an API, that API is being used by another API. So in that cases, you have to think about who is actually using. If it is a technical aspect, then you can say as an API user, you can talk about it, right? Like this. Now, Shuman is saying, if the story aim is to create an API which will be consumed by a service, can we write as a, yes, exactly. See, again, Suman, it's at the end of the day, I want to say, who is consuming my effort? If that is an API, if that is a service, if there's an administrator, there's a user, that has to be there. At the end of the day, I am writing my functionality so that that service can use my effort, my story, my feature. So in technical implementation, where we develop only the middle layer, middle layer and database layer, so that front end people can actually come and plug in here. In such scenarios, you can actually say as a service user, as a, you see, if you think about it, if you apply 5Y on top of it, you can actually nail down to the real user in that scenario also. Okay, so how are, okay, I think, check it. Uh, can't vertical slicing give me a smaller user stories? Exactly. Chakri is saying, can't vertical slice give me smaller user stories? Obviously, when you're actually, see, at the end of the day, as much as possible, try to think the end user. Okay, the end user can be a person who's actually developing it, who is actually using it, or it can be a service. So the moment from the end user scenario point of view, if you think about it, definitely you can do a vertical slicing. In the process of vertical slicing, you can further split user stories. Now, Mohan is talking about on the story. Can we have analysis user story, design user story to split a big feature before implementation user story? Very good question, Mohan. Mohan, user stories can have a categories like, spike. A spike is something where certain effort is given to you. That's all. It's basically, spike is a special category of user story where you are given certain amount of time to make your hands dirty. For example, a big you have there's a gap in functionality, or some incident is there. You need to analyze it. Before, only after analyzing it, you can actually take a step of how to take it forward. So you need some time to analyze it. So there we use the word spike. When you say spike, it is the definite amount of time, that is 50 hours spike I am taking. That means 50 hours worth of time you are taking. As in that particular time period, you make your hands dirty, you understand, you troubleshoot, you reproduce, whatever you think, you do analysis. That is one scenario. The another special category of user stories is research user stories. Meaning, first you take a spike, you make your hands dirty, then you take up another you take up research story where you want to explore multiple alternatives available, so that you can actually come back saying that to meet this particular goal, I have 4 possible alternatives. And then you have another special category story called tracer bullet. The tracer bullet means you basically make sure that you implement bare minimum core functionality to make sure that you basically put you go through the front end, middle layer and database layer. You just sense how the system is touching. So tracer bullet is like taking the way the bullet passes. Similarly, you wanted to make a slice into the, you wanted to make a dent into the proposed system so that you can actually experience how UI, middle layer, database, how they're interacting. So by combining Spike, by combining research story and tracer bullet, there is high probability that team can have clarity about how to go forward. So definitely, Mohan, for design user story, in case of design, you can take the category called research user story. Similarly, analysis, you can take spikes. Hope it is clear. Now, there's someone asked another question. As a product owner, I have seen many times team repels against vertical slicing the stories to a small level. The reason I hear from them is one, there will be duplicate in testing effort. So let's do it all and their test. If I start, the UI works better to finish. If we will do it iteratively, a lot of time will be wasted. Have you come across such things from the team? uh, so it's all depends upon, say if you ask me a question, have I come across? Yes, I did come across, but it all depends upon how we negotiate the situation. So yes, there will be some amount of rework will be there. So using the concept of refactoring, we can always optimize this. Number one. Number two, see, it all depends upon the product owner's clarity about the requirement and the cooperation from the subject matter experts of the team. Means the team within the team, the subject matter experts, that how they actually cooperate, how they align to the overall goal. So as long as we can basically convince them, saying by doing this vertical slicing we can deliver this functionality at the end of this particular iteration, we may get buy-in. So Soman, there is possibility that this kind of ripple resistance may come from the team to us, but if we can basically come up with a good design approach from the team, and even product owner also comes he also comes with a clarity, there is a high possibility that we can convince team for vertical slicing. See, at the end of the day, if we keep delivering something to the end user, and the end user starts involving in our game, definitely our team also cooperates. So it's just not the vertical slicing as a concept, but by taking a vertical slicing, are we delivering to the end user frequently or not, or whether are we taking the support from the team or not, that also matters. Okay, do we estimate spike kind of user story? No, Siva Prakash. Spike is something wherein you want to make your hands dirty. You don't know, you are taking spike because you don't know what to do. You just wanted to investigate. So that's why we just take some amount of time, saying that 50 hours worth of work in this sprint I'll take. Now, how to split, next question, how to split user stories based on scenario? Okay, Srinivas, basically Srinivas, I wanted to tell you, while describing user stories, there used to be, whenever people use the word "and," okay, that is a potential, potential indicator to you, so that you can split there. Okay, there is another concept that we are going to talk as definition of ready at the end of this presentation, that may also give you some insights. Okay, and also we are going to talk about some case study here that may also give you some insights. Let me take the last question. Integrated projects which have both hardware and software, do we use separate user stories or hardware and software? See, again, I'm telling you, it is all about who is consuming your effort. Our team is spending some effort, means somebody should be consuming, right? So it all, you have to think about it. You have to involve how the use flow, how the consumption is happening. The moment you involve, you may get a pointer of who is the user. So definitely in a situation wherein machine to human interaction happening, or machine to machine interaction is happening, some user you can definitely identify. So definitely, if you can able to if we can discuss further on the context that you are in, we can able to figure out who is end user. Okay, so I'm just proceeding in the interest of the time. So again, I will stop somewhere then so that I can take question. Keep writing in this window so that we can take questions. Okay, now let's write user stories on the concept called bus reservation portal. First, I request you to have, whenever you're actually, when you're asked to write user stories, right? You first make sure that, you understand the overall flow of how the system is happening. Okay, so user able to log in, for example, in our bus reservation portal, user able to log in, that's the first thing. Then he should be able to see what is his booked history. Then he should be able to search for a bus in a given route. Once he searches, once he should be able to select a bus and seat. Then he should be able to pay the payment, and then he should be successfully reserving the seat. Then he logs out. That is one flow. The other thing is, he basically from the booked history page, he wanted to select some seats which are he wanted to cancel. Then he does the cancellation, and then a payment should be released, and then he should be logged out. So assume this is how a bus reservation portal graphical flow of major epics. These are all epics. Okay, it's not just user stories. Then to achieve each block, you need to have multiple number of user stories. You have to have multiple number of user stories to achieve each of the epics here. Okay, first what I'm asking is, whenever you're asked to write user stories, you first need to say, you need to think about what is the proposed system, how the graphical flow of epics are written here. Then let's take login epic here. Okay, the wireframe is given here. Typically a login here, username, password, text box are there. Login command button is there. New members, if you are a new member, you can sign up, and if you're already an existing member, you can enter your valid user ID and password and click on login. And in case you forget the password, we wanted to enable that functionality. Let's assume this simple case. Okay, first one, as a product owner, I want login functionality so that users can log in or sign up. So that's the item I want to bring it to you. Okay, now the conditions of satisfaction is, first one is, given register user access, I mean given that register user accesses the portal, when user enters his valid username and password, then user should log into the portal. That's the first condition of satisfaction. Second is, given that registered user forgets his or her password, when the user enters his or her valid registered email ID, then user password to be sent out to user's valid registered email. Okay, so in case it is basically talking about forget functionality. If so that by entering his valid user ID, he should be receiving his password to his registered email. Then third one is talking about, given that new user wants to sign up, when user enters required registration details, then user should be able to sign up successfully. So this third one is actually talking about, if you want to sign up, this whenever you want to sign up, then once you enter all the necessary details, then you should be able to sign up to the portal. So these are the three conditions of satisfaction to meet the item that I have described here. Okay, now the question is, whatever item, as a product owner, I want login functionality so that users can log in or sign up. Is it a user story or epic or a sub epic? Can you please type your answer, option A or option B, in the chart window? Select your option in the chart window and submit. I want others also to to attempt. Is it a user story or an epic? Okay. Okay, I am providing the answer. It is epic. You know why? Because I want login functionality. Login functionality is a major thing. It's a major thing. It's not easy. As a product owner, I want login functionality. It's a major thing. Okay, and to me, what is there in login? How do you want to log in? So much thing need to enter into this so that user can log in or sign up. Even the outcomes, the so that clause the so that clause is also giving me is pointing me to multiple benefits. So obviously it is epic or sub epic. Okay, so for clarity, I'm saying an epic can have sub epics, as sub epics can have multiple user stories. So if I come top down, it is multiple user stories, they make up sub epic, multiple sub epics make up an epic, and multiple epics may make an initiative or a project. Okay, so as I said earlier, if you assume it, if you see a tree, that the trunk, okay, the trunk is the epic and the branches are the subepics, and the leaves or fruits or user stories. Okay, so friends, Balaji has a question. How does theme fit in? Balaji, theme is a logical grouping of the user stories. For example, let me go to the previous slide here. Here I'm saying epic, sub-epic and user stories. Now, this is basically a vertical way I'm saying, okay, these many user stories make up this sub-epic, these many sub-epic makes an epic. Now, theme is, I want to talk about all performance user stories I want to group. That's a theme. Okay, I want to say, from the end user point of view, all the, if you take a Facebook as the application, you want to say all create post related stories, I want to take it up. That's a theme. Theme is a group word. It's a group word based on which you wanted to horizontally tie. That's a theme. So typically in a practical scenarios, the performance stories, stress stories, reliable stories, scalability stories, so stabilization stories, regression stories. So I'm using so many horizontal words wherein across epic and sub-epics you can actually tie them user stories. So theme is a horizontal virtual grouping of user stories. Is it clear, Balaji? Yes. Okay, friends. Now let's go to a story here. Okay, now, yes, as I said here, this is an epic. Okay, let's now get on one by one. As a traveler, there's a user story I'm talking now. As a traveler, I want to log into the portal so that I can book tickets. The positive case, the condition of satisfaction is, okay, given registered user accesses the portal, when user enters his or her valid username and password, then user should be log in and see the booked history page. So it's a positive case, means it's an expected scenario. This is condition of satisfaction or acceptance criteria. Let's talk about some negative case. Means given registered user access the portal, when user enters invalid username and password, then user should not log in and user gets invalid username and password message. The third one is non-functional. It's talking about performance here. Given registered user access our website, when user enters valid username and password, then user should log in within 60 seconds. So my dear friends, see here. First, I want the acceptance criteria in expected scenario. There's a positive case, expected. It's an expected. What are the expected cases for me? What are the positive parts for me? Then second is failure scenario, negative cases. When my use case should fail, okay, or when my user story should fail. The third one is non-functional, means performance related thing or scalability related thing. So please think about three aspects. Positive path, positively what kind of response I want. Second, what kind of errors the end user should receive. Third one is the non-functionally what kind of experience you wanted to bring it to the end user. So by keeping this kind of a framework in your mind, there's high possibility that you bring in all possible acceptance criteria to the board. The next question, next user story, let's take. Okay, this is, as a traveler, I want to be reminded my password and to my email ID so that I can recollect my password. So as a traveler, I want to be reminded my password to my email ID so that I can recollect my password. It's talking about forget password functionality. So let's talk about the positive case here. The positive thing is the expected functionality. Given that registered user forgets the password, when user enters registered email ID and clicks on the forget password link, then user password to be sent to the user's registered email. That's an expected thing. What's the negative case? Given that registered user forgets the password, when user enters invalid email ID, then user should be shown the message invalid email ID. Means we don't have this email ID in our database, or this particular email ID has not been registered so far. Non-functional. Non-functional talks about given the registered user forgets the password, when the user enters registered email ID, then user should be login to the portal within 60 seconds. So typically what I'm telling is in real-time scenario, we don't think in terms of whether we are writing conditions of satisfaction or acceptance criteria in this format or not, number one. Number two, even if we write, we don't think about what is the main path or expected path or success path. What are the alternate paths I can have? When I say path, it's not how, it's about the experience end user is getting. And then third one is what is the non-functional, what kind of non-functional experience we want to give to the end user. So there are two things that I want to tell. A, the user story template. B, the template that we have to use for the documenting the acceptance criteria. On field, I come across acceptance criteria written in just like I want this, or this is what is expected, this is what is expected, like this. I see product owners and team together in their grooming session writing like this. They won't give importance to the scenario for that expected outcome, the trigger that actually causes. See, it is important. The scenario and the trigger that is alerting the scenario is also important for the expected outcome. Together only it makes good sense. So that's why I wanted to give you this framework here. Let's go to and write another user story here. Third one, sorry. As a third, okay. Okay, this is done. Yeah. So far we have written, the epic called as a product owner, I want login functionality so that users can log in and sign up. We actually talked about first user story as, how you can log in and book tickets for the regular user, for the registered user. Second, we talked so far about forgot password functionality. Now we are talking about as a new member, I want to sign up to the portal so that I can buy tickets. Let's focus here. So as a new member seeking registration, I want to submit my registration details within bracket, username, first name, last name, email, gender, date of birth, mobile number, nationality, national address, valid ID type, valid ID number, so that I can receive registration to be confirmed email with verify email link. You all get verify email link, right? So as soon as I submit all the necessary details, those necessary means I have documented here, then I want to receive the verify link, email link, so that I can get actually successfully registered next. So the first thing is I should get email. So let's see how the use case here. Given the new user, first conditions of satisfaction, which is a positive path, expected path. Given the new user wants to register, when user submits registration details, all the details I have documented here, then user should receive registration to be confirmed email with verify email link to his email ID. The second case is conditionals, means conditions. For example, if you wanted to select ID type, the ID type can be a driving license, passport, PAN card, voter ID, SSN, Aadhaar card only. So how do you restrict it? Given that new user wants to register, when user enters registration details, ID type and ID number, then user should be restricted to select ID type as driving license, passport, PAN card, voter ID, SSN, Aadhaar card only. See, let me talk about what happens on the ground. When we are writing to so detailed, some people may feel that we are too detailed, this much clarity is not required. My dear friend, I'm telling you very frankly, today, both in professional life and personal life, at the needed time, we are not asking right questions. Because we are not asking right questions, we are taking wrong decisions. I can tell you with 90% to 90% scenarios it happens. Okay, inside every problem there will be certain ambiguity. That ambiguity we are unable to unearth because we are unable to ask the right questions. Asking the art of right questions itself makes us distinct on the field. That's why do not feel that we are too much process here. Whenever given what is the scenario, when a specific trigger happens, then I want this expected outcome. Be very clear here. It brings a lot of clarity to you. Okay. The negative case, given the new user wants to sign up, when user enters invalid registration details, then system should pop up invalid entry message, and you should not receive any email after that. So that's a negative case. Let's talk about the fourth use case. As a new member, already submitted my registration details. That means what? You have already submitted registration details and you already received your email. Okay. I want to click on verify email link, whatever email I received, so that I can get registered successfully. The positive case is the user selects and user should be able to register. Now, when only given a scenario where I already submitted my registration details and I received an email, then when I select on the email, select verify link, then user should be successfully registered. Negative case, given that new user submits registration details and the user receives registration to be confirmed email with verify email link, when user does not select verify email link, that means you received email but you have not clicked on verify email link, then we wanted to tag that email ID or user as in hold status. Okay, similar non-functional scenario. Non-functional is given that new user submits the registration details, when user selects verify email link, then user should be registered within X seconds. That can be 15 seconds, that can be 30 seconds, or that can be 60 seconds. So the important part that I want to bring to you is have the framework. Okay, it's just not whether you are writing user stories properly or not. It's also about, are you able to describe the acceptance criteria also properly or not? Are you able to understand the scenario behind the expected outcome properly or not? And not only that, are you thinking about what is the positive path? What is the alternate path? What are the failure paths? When I say path, it is expected outcome. So that's why I told some of the friends have asked difference between use case and user story. Use case deals technically how it talks about how the interactions, how the communication is touching upon different layers of your design and coming back to the user. So use case is talking about how part, whereas user story is talking about what user expects. That's what it is. That's the difference, right? So when I say positive case, negative case, and non-functional case, what user expects the positive path. When something bad happens, how should I let the user, how should I deal the user, or how should a user understand? Obviously we don't want 404 error, right? So how do I capture that and present it to the user in a way that user understands it? And then non-functional means what the kind of performance. Just 2 days back, okay, in my website I used Google Blogspot for my website. I saw on last Sunday that when I click on the links, they are not passing to the target blogs. That made me worried. I got confused. What did I do? What did I do differently in the last 4 days? Nothing I have done. For the last 10 days, I have not touched my website, but it is not navigating from one blog to another blog. As a user, I'm confused. I have great respect towards Google. I never expect there will be a problem with the Google. So I thought, did I do something wrong? I immediately went, I checked the links, still this is happening, same thing. Then I got into the product forums and then saw other people are also experiencing. Had I been told, currently this navigation is not properly working kind of a message, I would have felt happy. So when I say positive case, negative case, and non-functional, it's all about the user experience at the outcome end, what, right? That's what it is. So friends, if you see, I want to talk about what is upstream story, what is downstream story. Upstream, if you think of a river, upstream is at the source, downstream is towards end. Okay, so what I'm saying is, in the scenario that we have taken, right, upstream story, that means user entering his registration details and he receiving email, that should be first completed. Then only the user can enter into his email box and open that email and then click on verify email link, and then registration succeeds. So unless the registration details entered and email comes, unless that story gets completed, which is upstream to me, the downstream story can't be taken up. So have clarity about, people use the word upstream, downstream, right? So that's what it is. Okay, so let's next talk about, so this is how we have detailed the login epic using the using this particular template. So typically, if you ask me, how can we split user stories? Number one, by carefully examining the acceptance criteria, you get a clue of how to split the stories. Okay, so we have taken up this particular practical case. Let me I'll take the questions first. I'll just complete the remaining part and then come to questions. Okay, similarly, we can actually detail search functionality also. So I want to talk about what are the tips for writing effective user stories. First, be clear on the goal. What's the purpose I'm into? What's the purpose that we wanted to achieve? Then come up with graphical flow. Okay, this is the purpose and this is how the flow of the major objectives happens. A major epics, a major sub-epics happens. And then turn big stories or epics into bunch of smaller and independent stories. Stories are independent to each other. You should make sure that stories are independent to each other. Stories have single measure responsibility. Stories do not repeat themselves. Okay, come up with clear conditions of satisfaction, and please understand, conversations are very, very important. These conversations actually give flesh to the user story. Okay, and I want to talk about invest principle. Invest is basically, it's part of, I stands for independent, means we want the stories to be independent to each other. We want, whenever I look at the story, it should be negotiable, means I should be able to describe what, not how, because how is different. By looking at the story, what is requested, what is to be achieved, that should be very clear, and I should be able to negotiate. For example, why this is what is requested. Okay, we are achieving this in other functionality also, why not we club there? What is the specific different thing we are looking at it? So team, by looking at the user story, they should be in a position to negotiate. And then valuable, it must be valuable to the end user. This is where we are talking about vertical slicing. Okay, and fourth one is estimable, means basically we have to help, means estimable, we should be able to estimate, meaning you should be able to estimate, so that the product owner or customer can prioritize this based on cost. And then sizable, means you should be able to implement the story within a sprint. Okay, you can't have a story that takes 2 or 3 user stories, at least at the planning stage. At the planning stage, you have to split the stories in such a way that each user story can be implemented in one iteration or sprint. Okay, on sprint. Then each user story should be testable, means conditions of satisfaction should be measurable satisfaction. Okay, now we don't want a generic test cases, we want a clear and crisp measurable test cases, so that we can actually test whether the user story is properly accomplished or not. So definition of ready definitely have all these attributes plus some other attributes of what team thinks about. So my dear friends, what I want to let you know here is, definition of ready means unless these items are available, means unless people sees that stories are independent, they can able to negotiate, story should be valuable, story should be estimatable, story can be completed within a sprint, and story can be tested and with a clear measurable conditions of satisfaction. If these things are not available, then the team can simply say, look, product owner, I don't want to take up the story. The story is not ready for sprint. Please, we need to do some more groundwork on it. So definition of ready is when team can pick up a story. Unless these items plus some other customizable items, some other items team wants to add to this, that's called definition of story. Definition of ready. Definition of ready means invest plus some other item what team thinks. So these items need to be completely satisfied, then only teams can actually accept. Yesterday, I come across a scenario where some of the team members saying, look, the upstream story is not ready and my product owner is asking me to take up the downstream story. We told, but we were asked to take it up. What can I do? Then I said, look, you have to go back and say, as a team, you can, definition of ready is not met, and so please please ask him to rework on it, and you can't take it up for the sprint. So unless definition of ready items or the criteria is met, the team cannot take stories. Team can proudly reject the stories saying, product owner, this definition of ready items are not met. Okay, so now finally, my dear friends, before finally what I'm saying is, user story conversations are very, very important. They need to capture the user story in the specified template. They need to have a proper acceptance criteria that captures success, failure on alternate paths, non-functional scenarios, upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies, wireframes, assumptions made, clarification pending. Is it definition of ready or not? So these are the different levers you wanted to have in mind while grooming, while refining a user story. And all these things need to be captured in the tool like version 1, Rally, Jira kind of a thing, with minimum possible documentation. But your conversation should focus upon all those things. When I say user story, it's just not a template following. As a user, I want this functionality so that I can achieve this. That's not only thing. That's only, if you see here, it's just 1/8 of it. Okay, you need to have acceptance criteria. You need to think about what are the upstream dependencies, downstream dependencies, wireframes, assumptions, and clarifications pending, and is it definition ready or not. So these are the things that we need to provide focus while grooming stories. So my dear friends, let me take some questions now. Suman asks, how do we draw lines between test cases and scenarios of satisfaction? Suman, very good question. Okay, let me continue. I'm trying to ask up to what level we should write the acceptance criteria. If it's going to cover each and every aspect, it will become test case. Exactly, Suman, you're right. When, see, acceptance criteria is also one of the test criteria. We call it as acceptance test case. You have to stay a level where end user can actually experience the test cases. So if you ask me, acceptance test cases form the source for your functional test cases, regression test cases. Okay, so to meet one acceptance test cases, you may have 5 or 6 functional test cases, 3 or some X number of regression test cases, Y number of integration test cases can be like this. So typically, the only clue that I want to give it to you is, when you are discussing about user stories, you will actually focus about what part only, what end user experiences. So when you stay there, you are not actually getting down how part. Okay, then your acceptance test conditions should be user experienceable outcome, expected outcome should be there. So that's where you have to stand upon. The next question. Yeah. So again, Suman, to answer your question, stay there where end user can experience, where end user can test. Okay, that's where it is. Next. See, for example, I want to give you one of the examples today I have witnessed. Okay, I was telling in this webinar that today I happened to go to one telecom provider. I asked them, you have 3 plans, can you tell me what's the difference? Okay, so as a user, I'll be happy, Okay, what is the difference in voice calls I'm getting, how much data usage I'm getting, what is the cost I'm getting. That's sufficient for me. So as a user, I can experience it, I can understand it, stay there. But to achieve that particular difference, what kind of things internally you're doing, they all become technical functional test cases. They actually focus upon how to achieve this. So how to achieve this is not part of acceptance test criteria. It's we just stay upon user experienceable test results. Okay, next, Rajarshi. But we know user stories are invest. I think Rajarshi have covered this invest principle here already. Chakri is saying, can you elaborate more on upstream and downstream user stories? Can I establish a relation between these streams with sequence line diagrams? Like upstream means unless upstream stories are completed, downstream stories cannot be taken up. Means upstream stories need to be completed first for the downstream stories to get started. I'll give you a practical scenario, Chakri. uh, in our organizations you have a front end teams, okay, and those front end teams, they depend upon the middle layer to be completed. So unless the middle layer functionality can be unless that is finished or that is available, the front end people can't create their own story and start plugging into this. So the upstream for them is the middle layer people, middle layer APIs need to be developed. Then only the user interface related stories can be plugged down. So upstream means those need to be completed first. Downstream means basically they are follow-up stories. Okay, Rajesh, where is it? Okay, Raj. The fundamental problem in our organization is that product owner belongs to the customer organization. We have a proxy product owner who finds it difficult to negotiate with the main PO. How do we handle such situation? See, Rajesh, I wanted to first ask, what is the motivation of being branded as agile? I want to ask the CEO. I want to be ruthlessly, I want to be frank. Okay, if the the benefit where the company is envisaging is reducing the cycle time, increasing the quality, or improving the innovation, increasing the collaboration, okay, delivering frequently to the end user. If those are the things, right, then we have to set right the organization structure. Okay, so today one of the major problems we are experiencing is we are implementing agile in some areas, but sometimes we are just implementing the old methodology. For example, we expect sufficient interactions between product owner and the team. I expect there's a virtual team, but we have channels like video conferencing, link, okay, messengers, we can talk. So the conversations are important. If without having those conversations, if the product owner delegates the responsibility to somebody else on the offshore so that he can act as a proxy product owner, obviously the thick part is missing. First of all, I want to ask whether the real product owner is talking to the stakeholders or not. If not, the whole chain is getting missed. So yes, you are actually talking about a fundamental problem organizationally we have to deal there. So any questions? Let me take questions. Okay, now yes, check the dependent stories. Yes, check you're right. I was talking about dependent stories for the dependent stories while you're talking about upstream, downstream. So friends, any further questions? You can type here. Then thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to provide you more such webinars so that it will be useful to you on the ground. If you have any specific questions, you can write to me on my email here, I mentioned here, so that I can revert back to you. Thank you very much for your time on this Friday night, and I wish you a happy weekend. Thank you.